just to look quickly at the cost centers that the book gives as your example is cost centers in a university. So they're saying a university has 3 colleges here. This one, College of Business, Engineering, Arts and Sciences, and within there you could look deeper and you could look at the marketing department, the accounting department, and the management department. And if you really want to look at accounting, you'd be looking at accounting. So the point is that you can drill down on the cost centers. You can get as specific as all the way getting down to the area of accounting, or you could say, well, what is the College of Businesses cost center? What is the cost center of the university? What are the cost centers of the university? You can break that down further. What are the businesses specific cost centers? And then what exactly does accounting spend? What is the cost center for accounting? So just a little bit of a visual that the book gives you. All right, so let's look at a little bit of a visual here. Let's say you've got this vice president of production who's in charge of plants A and plants B. Well, all right, so if I had a question about plant A, I would go down to the manager of plant A. And once I went down to the manager of plant A, then the manager of plant A is in charge of 3 departments, Department 1, Department 2, and Department 3. So if I had a question about Department 1, I would drill down then to supervisor of Department 1. The point is that the individual departments are cost centers, the plant A is the cost center, and the entire production overall is a cost center. So we can look at each of these in turn. And I'm not expecting you to do the calculations on these. I don't think there actually are any in this chapter. Not this chapter, but I don't think there are any reflective of what I'm about to show you. But what I want you to realize is the interrelationships between what we're looking at. So, all right, let's say we're looking at the vice president report. We're looking at the top of that chart there. And we're saying, okay, well, how did we perform against our budget? And we would look at it and say, all right, this is our budgeted amount, this is our actual amount. And this is for the whole thing. This is for administration, plant A, and plant B, because we're looking at the top over here, the reports at the top of this chain. All right, so we're looking at it, we're saying, okay, well, 19.5 was the budget, we spent 19.7, we're 200 over budget. Let's, if you want to add some zeros to this, if you want it to feel like it's more realistic. Plant A, our budgeted amount was $467,000. We're actually at $470. They were $2,800 over budget, and Plant B was doing pretty well. They're under budget by $925. So if I was the vice president, like I said, if you wanted to add a couple of zeros to this, what if that was $2.8 million over budget? Okay, let's say there are 3 more zeros here. So if I'm the vice president, I would go down to Plant A and say, hey, what's going on over here? Why were you $2 million over budget? So taking this a level down, we would go and look at the manager of Plant A. And we'd say, all right, manager, where were you? Why are you $2.8 million over budget? Well, that manager is in charge of 3 departments, as we showed, Departments 1, 2, and 3. And we'd say, all right, well, what's going on in Department 1? What's going on in Department 2? What's going on in Department 3? And it looks like Departments 1 and 2 were both over budget. So if I was this manager here, I would go to Departments 1 and 2 and say, hey, what's going on? Why were you guys over budget? Well, in this case, we're choosing to look at Department 1, even though Department 2 is over budget as well, but for the example, we're looking at Department 1. We would probably, in real life, look at both. So, you see how we're taking these numbers, the 109 and 111, and we're going, hey, Department 1, what's going on? So here's the explanation of the 109 and 111. So let's look at it individual by the line item, because now we went down to the supervisor of Department 1 and we said, why are you over budget? And when we looked at it, it looks like materials is what put us over budget. That's the big amount that put us over where we expected to be. So with that, who am I going to go to if my materials were more expensive than we expected them to be? My answer would be I would go to the purchasing manager and say, hey, why are these materials? Why did we pay more for these materials than we had expected to when we prepared this budget? So the idea is at different levels you see different things, and you can continue to drill down on each of these levels to get to why your budget is what it is. You can imagine how important this would be for running the business. Now, this level of detail is not something that top boss would want to see there. This is not something that the entire not manager, what was he called? Let's say the vice president, sorry. This is not something the vice president would want to see. He would not want to see the difference between power and light. He doesn't have time for that. He's too big for that. But what we could do is he could send it down the chain to find out why are they over budget. And, this is not a report he would review daily or monthly. It would be something that was reviewed at a lower level, and he would only get that high level budget. All right, switching gears, let's look at profit centers. With a profit center, a manager not only has the responsibility for costs, but he also has the responsibilities for revenues. So with that, that means he's in charge of profits. He has some say in what the profits are as well. Because if you're in charge of costs and you're in charge of revenues, then you're the next step is basically you're in charge of profits, right? Revenues minus costs. So as it says here, profit centers can be divisions, departments, or products. As I discussed before, you can only be in charge of certain things. You can't be in charge of everything. You can't be in charge of every single expense. You can't be in charge of every single revenue. But you do have what are called controllable revenues and controllable expenses. So based on your job, if you're a profit center, based on your job, you're in charge of certain revenues and certain expenses, and those are called controllable revenues and controllable expenses. Back to what I was saying in the first set, the first part of the screencast, was that, the purchasing manager can't be in charge of the cost of the employee's salaries because that's not a controllable expense for him. All right, within profit centers you have service department charges, and what this is there are often service departments that can service more than one area. Okay, you might have a research and development department that services different units, different divisions within your company. You could have maybe one legal team that services multiple divisions as well. All right, so the idea here is that you could have these shared services, payroll, personnel. You could have human resources in here as well. The biggest question for our purposes, because we're the accountants, is how do we allocate the costs of those shared services to our individual profit centers? All right, what I mean by that is, how do we say, well, the legal department worked this much for Division A and this much for Division B, and so therefore Division A should bear this much cost and Division B should bear this much cost. Okay, so this is really some of the very little number crunching we're having in this chapter. What we're going to do is I'm going to look at an example here. It's the best way to explain how you could split these items. So here we go. We have this Nova Entertainment Group has two operating divisions, a theme park division and a movie production division, right? The revenues and direct operating expenses for the two divisions are shown below. So you've got a theme park division and a movie park division. It has revenues here. Looks like theme park is the big money maker and movie production division is over here. Okay, so now here's the thing. We share services. NEG's two departments share services. They have a purchasing department that they share their payroll, and they share their legal services. Now, what you have to ask yourself is, how do we decide how much the movie making division gets allocated of these costs versus the theme park division? Well, you have to come up with some kind of a basis, and let me start off with maybe legal. I would say to myself, how do I split these costs between the two? And for legal, you might think to yourself, well, how many hours did the lawyers spend on the theme park division rather than the movie division? And that would be how I would allocate the $250,000. Whoever had, more hours would get a bigger part of the bill. And let's say for payroll accounting. Payroll accounting might be, well, what if the theme park division has a ton of employees and the movie department division only has a few? All right, it's probably actually the reverse, but we'll get into that in a second. Well, if that's the case, whoever has the most paychecks should get allocated more of the payroll cost. And for purchases, who makes more purchases? Who has more purchase orders? Is it the theme park division or the movie division? And you would allocate them maybe on the basis of how many purchase orders are made each year. Okay, so looking at this, well, look at that. There's my bill breakdown. Purchasing, number of purchase requisitions, payroll accounting, payroll checks, and legal, number of billed hours. Okay, so I'm doing pretty well considering I hadn't seen that slide before stating my case there. All right, so let's look at purchasing first. Actually, I'm going to start a new set of this, so I'll see you in a second.